Michael Porter Jr. came into the league a defensive liability, so much so that he was getting benched in the fourth quarter of games because he would just be attacked so ruthlessly. But year after year, MPJ has worked to become a neutral, then a good, and now a great defensive player in the 2023-24 season. We saw this growth in the postseason, I think, a lot, especially when his shot wasn't falling. He was still able to impact the game with his help side rim protection, elite defensive rebounding, and much improved ISO defense. Coming into this year, a lot was thought and said about how MPJ could get better. And so far into this year where his shot isn't falling, especially from deep where he's struggling, I think it's safe to say that MPJ's impact has never been greater. Michael Porter Jr. has turned himself into not just a solid or a good defender, but a great one. His ISO defense is better than ever, his rim protection has gone better, and the defensive awareness is much improved while still being an elite defensive rebounder. In this video, I want to just look at some of the possessions he's had on guys like Luka, Curry, Zach LaVine, and his overall impact on the defensive end, and how this has led the Nuggets to being such a great defense to start the year alongside KCP and Aaron Gordon. First, let's look at some possessions when MPJ gets switched out to Luka. Here on this first one, MPJ gets switched out. Luka tries to hit him with the little step back three, and over that length, that's just a tough shot to make time in and time again. Next, Luka gets switched out on him again, does a good job of staying with and moving his feet and making that another tough step back three over his length. Here, Luka's like, okay, time to go into the interior on him, tries to use that weight and size to bully MPJ, maybe draw a foul. Does a great job of not fouling, staying with Luka and making that a tough shot over his size. Here, in like semi-transition, he does a good job of recognizing KCP has a mismatch on Luka, does a good job of flashing for a little quick double, forces him into trying to draw a contact, and that's just a bad shot from Luka. Here, he's going to get switched out, gives him a little bit too much of a cushion, and Luka drills that in his face. And once again, here, Luka's looking for that switch, using Jones as a little screener to get Michael Porter Jr. isolated on the perimeter. He does a little bit of a bad job of giving him too much space, lets Luka go into him too much, and that's just a tough shot. Now let's look at some help side defense from the Warriors game. Here, he does a good job of reading the play, contesting on the drive, and then just using ball pressure to force Klay into a turnover. Here, we're going to see that size and length coming into effect again on another one of Klay's drives where he doesn't even go for the basket and tries to hit a pass in traffic, which leads to another turnover. Here, we're going to see that length come into effect on another one of the help side drives with Sarge driving for the ball. Does a good job of containing it. He gets the ball off, but he closes out to Wiggins fast enough to make that still a tough shot. Here, we're going to just see him use that length and size to battle on the board with Andrew Wiggins, who's a great athlete, and he does a great job of securing the defensive rebound. Here, he's going to stay with Wiggins in the post, gets hit with a move, does a good job of staying down and contesting that shot well. Now let's take a step back and look at some numbers to really help illustrate how much of an impact MPJ is having on rim protection for the Denver Nuggets. Right now, on shots less than 10 feet away and guarded by MPJ, opponents are shooting 15% worse than their regular season averages. On shots less than 6 feet away, opponents are shooting 9% worse. Let me just tell you how that stacks up with some other all defensive team players. Right now, that minus 15 on 10 feet away and minus 9 on 6 feet away is better than the reigning defensive player of the year, Jaren Jackson Jr., better than the runner-up in Brook Lopez, better than Miles Turner, better than Derek Lively, and kind of comparable to Bam Adebayo, who's posting just insane defensive numbers overall. Yes, opponents are shooting a little bit better on threes and long twos, but he doesn't really guard that many of those, and I think those shots are just less impactful to be great at defense than shots closer to the rim, which Michael Porter Jr. is doing an amazing job of making those shots tougher for opponents. As well as, there's also some advanced numbers that really help back this up. Right now, when Michael Porter Jr. is on the floor for the Nuggets, they have a defensive rating of 109, which would be 8th best in the entire league. The Nuggets also have an offensive rating of 124, which would be first place by a decent bit, with MPJ on the floor, which gives him a net rating of plus 15.4. He's also been absolutely massive on the defensive boards, and when he's on the court, the Nuggets grab 80% of all defensive rebounds and 54% of all total rebounds. And for just some basic box score numbers, he's putting up about a block a game and about 0.5 steals per game, so 1.5 stocks, which is pretty decent. I think it's also important to know that MPJ came into this year dealing with a grade 2 ankle sprain, according to himself, which kept him out for the entirety of preseason, and he had to work back into game shape over the first 9 games so far. And I think he's looked really amazing in these 9 games. Offensively, his shot has struggled. I mean, he's still shooting 38%, but for his standards, that's below average. And while he still hasn't taken a leap as like a self-creator, I think his ability to just rise up, hit tough shots, and his playmaking chops have greatly improved. And I think we've been on display pretty much throughout the entire season. He's almost averaging 2 assists, or he might be averaging a 2-to-1 assist ratio. For a guy like Mike, That's amazing. I think his growth on the defensive end really cannot be understated on how much impact it has on this team's ceiling, and this team is already one of the best, if not the best teams in the entire league. Michael Porter Jr. can kind of rise back up to that 44-43% from deep, keep up this level of defense. He could easily be a 29-2 guy. And I think those types of numbers on one of the best teams in the league is like close to all-star status. And I think Michael Porter Jr. is close to having an all-star impact on the Nuggets. Especially without Murray here, more offensive load is going to be on him, and I think he's going to be able to rise to the challenge. I think Michael Porter Jr. has one of the best cases of being like a sneaky all-star for the first time this year, and I'm really excited to see how much better he can get on both sides of the floor.